When I wake up, I snap my eyes open and there's just blood everywhere. And I push myself up off the ground and I look at my driver, who looks at me and gasps with a look of horror on his face, and I'm like, oh, yep, nope, this is bad.
Most of the time when we're doing something, we're either doing it for ourselves or for someone else. But in the case of our duty, things get a little less clear. You see, when duty is the thing we're doing, we're kind of doing it for everybody, to live up to a promise that we made that we would fill a specific role in our society. Kenny Lyon was all about finding roles and filling them. Whenever he could see the world as a set of instructions, he could follow along nicely, and that got him pretty far as a Marine. One of the toughest requirements he had to meet, though, was figuring out how to go beyond instructions, to see them as a template, but to make your life your own. Doing that takes its own particular gift.
You don't always have to wait for the corpsman. You can start something. And he got to me, and I was saying, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. And the only thing he could do is scream corpsman up.
What is true bravery? What makes a hero a hero? Tested by the worries of what's happening at home, thousands of miles away, and the reality of what you're facing here and now. When your life is in danger every second, and it's either kill or be killed. From Wondery and Incongruity Media, this is Anthony Russo, and this is War. Technology should only make things more efficient, not only for running your business, but for staffing it as well. ZipRecruiter learns what you're looking for, identifies people with the right experience, and then invites them to apply for your job. In fact, 80% of employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site in just one day. ZipRecruiter even spotlights the strongest applications you receive, so you never miss a great match. The right candidates are out there. ZipRecruiter is how you find them. Right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/thisiswar. That's ZipRecruiter.com/thisiswar. ZipRecruiter.com/thisiswar. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Working 2 jobs through high school, Kenny didn't think too much about his future. As the only son, he wanted to be able to pitch in and to help out his mom with the bills, and also still have a couple dollars left over for himself. Kenny was a kind of a big, doughy kid with Coke bottle eyeglasses and a quick wit. No one looked at him and thought, that guy belongs in the military. Not even him. He was working as an electrician's assistant during his senior year of high school and trying to imagine life as an electrician. Everyone he worked with hated being an electrician. They hated being married and generally hated their life. Kenny knew he wanted more than that, not to feel dead inside and purposeless by the time he turned 30, but he didn't have a great alternate plan, so he put his head down and he got to work. He knew the rest would come eventually.
Once you've wired one house, you have wired them all. I thought it was going to be super cool and exciting because I had shocked myself when I was 6 and I was fascinated by electricity. But after being shocked a number of times, I was like, yeah, this isn't so fun anymore.
The thing about Kenny is that he could see patterns pretty easily. Learning new things gave him an immense amount of satisfaction. But once he could see his way to the end of a problem and figured out how things worked, everything lost its luster immediately. Still, he was nothing if not a practical guy. There just wasn't much opportunity in rural Maryland, and college was almost certainly out of the question given his financial circumstances. Still, even as he finished up his junior year of high school, entering the military hadn't even crossed his mind as a possibility. Once it did, though, it seemed the natural step. Kenny had been approached by the Marines, but his mother, Gigi, insisted that he check out some of the other services. This was absolutely fine with the Marine recruiter.
He was like, yeah, no, I encourage you to talk to everybody else. He's like, we'll be here when you come back. He had sold me the Marine Corps before I had even met him. So then when I walked back into the Marine recruiter's office, he's sitting there in his uniform with his chair tilted all the way back, feet on the desk, legs crossed, hands behind his head, and he looked right at me. He's like, "We ready to do this?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, yes. What he has, I want. That's awesome."
It was more than just the confidence, or rather, more than just the self-confidence that the recruiter projected. It was the institutional confidence. There were probably 100 other reasons that the other branches didn't appeal to Kenny, but they really all boiled down to the recruiter, because he seemed to speak with the force of the entire Marine Corps behind him. A kind of invitation to the possibility that one day Kenny would be able to speak with the force of the Marine Corps behind him as well. On some level, Kenny knew he had the resolve, but he needed a direction to point it, some place to focus his effort upon. He would join the Marines, get a world-class education in 4 years, and then be ready to find a job. Super simple, black and white, just the way Kenny preferred things.
My car had broken down, and they said it was going to be $700 to fix what was wrong with it. I was like, man, I do not have $700 as an 18-year-old. I'm like, all right, well, let me see what information they gave me, because information never hurt anybody. And I looked it up, and it was a $87 part online, and I bought a $24 Haynes repair manual, and we did it in the church parking lot across the street. My buddy brought over some tools, and I fixed it myself. And I was like, holy cow, like, it's instant gratification. Like, when you fix a car, you're like, I am all that is man.
As it would turn out, Kenny was only half kidding. Some of us are lucky enough to discover what makes us tick early on, or at least what makes us feel fulfilled. Kenny was pretty sure that being a mechanic in the Marines would be that thing for him. The surety of something working or not working, the challenge of getting everything in order so that it runs right, the arrangements of parts that fit and make sense with one another was something he knew would appeal to him. But being a mechanic isn't what Kenny's gift would turn out to be. Kenny's gift was finding out ways to be useful, for being able to meet another person's need without thought or question. And that is what the Marines would bring out in him.
Anything, so even growing up as a kid, if it had instructions, I could put it together. And so when I was given instructions about everything, I'm like, I can do this. And the military works because of we have instructions. Like, it's, it's never oh, well, I don't know how to figure this out. It's like, no, we already have done that. We have instructions. Here's step ABC, whatever.
As he headed out for Paris Island, life genuinely appeared that simple to 18-year-old Kenny Lyon. It would take him years to see the deeper implications of how much having instructions to follow appealed to him. On the face of it, finding and following instructions lightened his mind and gave him room to really think and take things in. In reality, though, it was even simpler and more visceral than that. Kenny wanted to know what was required of him so that he didn't let anyone down. If there was a proven way of doing things, he was happy to do it that way. But when things came apart, keeping his objective in mind is what got him through. It's what made him reliable, both to his superiors and to the people around him.
Actually, getting to Paris Island was an excursion because the flight was full. They weren't going to have another one in a certain amount of time, and I was like, look, we have to be there. Like, we have orders. And they're like, well, we can give you a taxi voucher. And I'm like, that's good enough for me.
Not long after he pulled up to the gates at Paris Island in a taxi cab, Kenny would be stranded in the desert, elbows deep in a dead vehicle, trying to bring it back to life so that he and his Marines could continue on in relative safety. During that year, Kenny would throw himself at the rules and cling to them as a unifying force for being a good Marine. He would shoot until he couldn't feel his legs beneath him and run until he couldn't breathe. He would take the instructions and get them executed every time and happily. Kenny even requested a reduced diet during boot camp to help him drop into a lower weight class. He graduated 50 pounds lighter than when he had entered the Marines, and 1,000,000 times more confident.
And my mom walked right by me, and I was like, no, wait, come back. I'm over here. And then during graduation, like, that was so amazing. I still remember the feeling. And it was just such a sense of accomplishment. Like, you're invincible when you graduate boot camp, like, in your mind.
And that is what the recruiter had. It was more than institutional confidence. It was institutional invincibility. Marines carry a certain invincibility that they first taste at boot camp, a kind of recognition that they have seen what they thought were their limits and then surpassed them. Mixed in with that is the knowledge that whatever they believe are their current limits also can be surpassed. Kenny excelled in Marine combat training and then in mechanic school and got his choice of assignments. East Coast, West Coast, or Japan. Kenny pictured beaches and girls and signed up for a West Coast assignment. He ended up in 29 Palms, assigned to Headquarters and Service, or H&S Company, essentially responsible for the general basic maintenance of the base's vehicles. Kenny's aptitude and attitude set him apart there almost at once, and one of his commanding officers suggested that he transfer. He got a line mechanic position, which would mean fixing LAVs, light armored vehicles, for combat troops. It was technically more difficult and almost certainly would involve overseas deployment, so Kenny jumped at the opportunity.
Yeah, so they moved me over, and mechanics are really on their own program, kind of, because we all group together and have to report to our staff sergeant, but I'm also technically attached to the platoon. The mechanic side usually took precedence, especially because as soon as I got there, they're like, hey, yeah, buckle up, we're going to Iraq in 28 days. I was like, all right, that's fun.
Mechanic is one of those combat field positions with no real backup. Like medics for vehicles, once a convoy has been stopped for a mechanical issue, it's not starting up again until a mechanic is finished. An LAR, or Light Armored Reconnaissance Convoy, then, has fighting Marines, one medical guy for the soldiers, and a mechanical guy for the vehicles. A big difference is that injured men can be medevaced. Blown-up vehicles tend to stay that way until they're fixed, and the tension can be exquisite. The way IEDs were starting to work when Kenny got there included an after-explosion attack. That is, an IED would go off, and, while the Marines were out repairing it, a small arms attack would follow. Kenny well knew that every second he took to work on a truck out in the desert was another second he was courting danger.
You can't think about that kind of pressure. So fixing the vehicle was important, but more important to me was there's 6 guys in each vehicle. I have 24 guys standing outside in the sun right now until I fix this vehicle. And once I fix this vehicle, those 24 guys can get back inside of the vehicle that's armored, and they'll be safer. So a lot of times when I was working on the vehicle, I was more stressed out the fact that I had friends outside that maybe, they're just taking a knee in the desert. Hopefully there's nobody looking. Hopefully there's nobody around. I was worried about those guys because I didn't want to let them down, even though I'm the mechanic, because I still rode in the back with them and cleared houses occasionally with them and did other things because they needed another person. We go out on a 12-hour patrol all day long. I have to do everything they do. And then when we get back at night, I have to fix the vehicles all night long. So I definitely didn't have a lot of sleep the first deployment. It was a lot of sleepless nights.
And there's where he got stuck. Kenny wanted to make sure he was there for the guys when the LAR was out on patrol, but he also wanted to make sure he was keeping the trucks in good fighting order. Because he was new, or because he was young, or maybe a bit of both, Kenny hadn't accounted for the fact that the body wears down and, just like a machine, if you don't take proper care of it, it will let you down when you least want it to.
I slept through the explosion that injured one of our own guys that was popped up out of the vehicle. He caught a ton of shrapnel to the face. Thankfully, he was wearing all of his gear, and his Kevlar actually took a big chunk of shrapnel to it. But, I have no idea that that's what happened. And they put this bloody body into the back of the vehicle, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And I was like, oh crap, he was my roommate. And so from then on, I had to go back to an empty Conex box. That was probably one of the hardest things, because that was the first time that I had physically seen one of my own guys get injured. Other guys would come back with cuts or scrapes, or the vehicle would come back and have this burned scorch marks on it from the explosions. But that was the first time I'd actually seen it. Humans are fragile creatures.
He says that like he's making a note of it, and on some level, maybe he was. Remember, for Kenny, the initial appeal of being Marine was just as a job opportunity. He wanted to find a way to get job skills without going broke doing it. It wasn't that he had a naive view of what he did for a living, or what the Marines around him did, but practically speaking, when you picture a Marine, you don't picture them dumped in a bloody heap next to you while you sleep. The war was getting more serious for Kenny, and in the ensuing months, mortar and IED attacks would increase and become more pointedly target as the Iraqis learned to deal with LAVs that, from their perspective, seemed magical. It's been a couple of months since I expanded beyond the executive razor to test drive some of Dollar Shave Club's other products, and I have to tell you, not only don't I miss not going to the drugstore at all, but I feel like I'm really getting better stuff anyway. The first thing I tried was the Amber Lavender Body Wash. I really just got the sample size on a whim, figuring the couple dollars would be worth it to know which products felt the best for me. I got one of the trial packs and knew right away after one shower that I'd be ordering the body wash again. Increasingly, Dollar Shave Club is destroying the notion of having to treat yourself when it comes to hygiene products. In addition to razors and body wash, Dollar Shave Club has shave butter, shampoo, toothpaste, everything you need to look, smell, and feel your best. The reason I ordered the lavender body wash was because I wanted to make sure I never ran out, and they always remind me when I need a refill. The body wash itself isn't heavy or perfumey, it's just clean. And the best part for me is that once you find the products you like, whether they be the One Wipe Charlie's or the Dr. Carver's Easy Shave Butter, you can just reorder them over and over again. I always feel a little ridiculous standing in the bath aisle trying to figure out what I need. Dollar Shave Club sends me as much as I need, right when I need it. You don't have to set foot in a store, wandering the aisles hunting for razors, shampoo, body wash, toothpaste, none of it. Test drive everything they have. You're definitely going to find something that you like. Remember, if you ever shower or brush your teeth or try to make your hair look presentable, Dollar Shave Club has a lot of stuff to help you out. And here's a great way to try a bunch of Dollar Shave Club's products. For just $5, you can get their Daily Essentials Starter Kit. It comes with a body cleanser, One Wipe Charlie's, their amazing butt wipes, their world-famous shave butter, and their best razor, the 6-blade Executive. Keep the blades coming for a few bucks more a month, and add in shampoo, toothpaste, or anything else you need. Check it all out at dollarshaveclub.com/thisiswar. That's dollarshaveclub.com/thisiswar. dollarshaveclub.com/thisiswar. As Kenny's first tour came to a close, there was an uptick in what were called VBID, or vehicle-borne IED attacks.
Like a few weeks prior, we had gotten an intel brief that because every time they blew us up, we would pick up all the pieces, every nut and bolt, and get the vehicle out of there within hours, that they thought our vehicles had force fields. I started laughing. I was like, there's no way. Come on, like this isn't Star Trek. And that was when they started using them.
Simply put, the insurgents would park a car by the side of the road and wait. When a convoy came by, they would detonate themselves.
And you heard a gigantic explosion. Like we thought we were taking incoming mortars. And then we hear over the radio, Red 2, are you okay? And we were like, oh crap.
As he rushed to the scene, Kenny was prepared for the worst. That isn't what he found when he got there, though. Instead, he saw something that just wouldn't register with him. There was an engine block sitting in the middle of the road, and the LAV driver was standing near it, sweating and shaking and smoking. He was almost incoherent when Kenny reached him.
He's like, dude, I tried. They pulled over like they were supposed to, and then just as I went by, just boom. And his hand is shaking while he's telling me this. He's like, I'm going to help you. I'm like, no, you're fine. Because normally the driver helps the mechanic get the vehicle.
Sometimes the little breaks are the ones that matter the most. The driver had just looked into the face of a man who looked back at him and then blew himself up with the full intention of taking as many Marines with him as he could. The bomber didn't get any, but he did put a really nasty hurting on one of the LAVs. It was beyond field repair. Kenny hooked up a rig that allowed one of the LAVs to tow the other one with just ropes. It was slow going, but they made it back in one piece. In Iraq, in 2004, LAV parts were in short supply. So the vehicles that Kenny turned over to the relieving platoon were about 1/3 green, as opposed to the desert khaki color they were when he had received them. By the time they had cycled out, the lead vehicle had been blown up 12 times. Each time, Kenny and the other mechanics replaced it and got it back out on the road. But that's not where the pride came from, although he was quite proud of his part in keeping the fleet running. For Kenny, the pride came in keeping his buddies safe, not leaving them stranded, and doing his job without error or question.
You don't think about those things. Like you do what you're told to the best of your abilities. Like I never ran into a situation where I was like, sir, there's nothing we can do. Like that was never a scenario I encountered. So it never really weighed on me. Like I wanted to just make sure that all my buddies were safe. And I know that they're safer in the vehicle than outside of the vehicle. So that was a lot of my driving force for as whenever I fixed the vehicle. I wanted to make sure that we were able to get everybody back inside the vehicles where we have at least some armor and a 25 millimeter chain gun that can rain down death and destruction.
The best way to keep everyone safe is to make sure that everyone does their part. Kenny's part was keeping the vehicles running and backing up the other Marines as needed. And as his first tour ended and he began gearing up for his second tour, Kenny was just the right amount of confident. He knew the LAVs wouldn't let him down, or rather, that if they did, he probably could get them out of it. But he also knew the combat engineers were learning from their mistakes and planning to make a much better go of it the second time around as well. What he hadn't expected was that the Iraqis would do the same. He hadn't been involved in any close-quarter firefights the entire first tour, but there were a few right away during his second, and they brought with them a foreboding that just wasn't present the first time he was there.
So the second time we landed in Al-Assad, and then we took control of our vehicles and road marched out to Camp Fallujah. The tents that they originally had for us that were all set up with cots in them and everything had a giant hole in the canvas top because a mortar had come through the night before and struck the ground. It didn't go off, but, a mortar shell just fell through the ceiling of it. So they were like, you're going to get the one right next to it. So, yeah. Second time I was like, man, there's a lot of close calls. I don't know how many more close calls I get.
There's a kind of weird foreshadowing that comes from multiple tours. Seeing the capricious way death and injury is meted out, members of the military get a gallows humor as well as an odd fatalism. Wondering whether your number is up is common. Thinking about the way you're tempting fate every time you go out beyond the wire also is common. Almost everyone who feels like this is the time their luck will run out is wrong by those lights. But sometimes they're right, and sometimes nothing can be done for it.
So it was May 1st. It was a crisp morning. We had set up a vehicle checkpoint, and a vehicle had pulled up to our checkpoint and decided he didn't want to do it and turned around. Well, that's not allowed. So our vehicle, a 14-ton LAV with a 25 millimeter chain gun on it, chased this man down.
It's stories like this that make stories about your number being up start to make sense. The man in the car was just scared. He never had come across that kind of firepower at a checkpoint before, and he just turned tail and ran. In the chase, however, the LAV had a bit of a hiccup. A part that tended to be weak anyway broke, and rather than fixing it right on the spot, the Marines found a safe haven where they could have a break while Kenny went to work on the truck.
It wasn't even a fob. It was like just a little outpost. It was an abandoned chicken farmhouse that had a nice brick wall around it with two entrances so we could pull the vehicles in one way and leave another. And I'm fixing the vehicle at lunchtime. The next thing I know, because I'm sitting down, I turn back to what I'm doing on the vehicle. The next thing I know, my ears are ringing and it felt like somebody had hit me in the back of the head with a frying pan. And I thought to myself, I was like, oh God, help me, because I knew that I was super not okay.
As they told it to him later, a mortar landed fewer than 10 feet behind him and to his right as he bent to work on the truck.
I heard it come out of the tube. We were sitting down working on the vehicle, and we hear thunk, 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 which is, from getting mortared twice a day the first time we were over there. It was very familiar. And I looked at my driver and I asked him, and I'm like, dude, is that incoming? And I kind of look around and I'm like, no, that sounded kind of far away. I think we'll be fine. I've had mortars land close to me first time over there, and they whistle. So if it's within 100 feet of you, like you hear it, zzz, boom. But this one was just, oh, no, whatever. It must have been nothing. Go back to work, and then all of a sudden explosion. And everything slowed down. And describing it doesn't do it justice. It's like things I could hear seconds being counted, and in that time, I tensed my arms up across my chest in a cross pattern, and it felt like something was wrong with my right thumb, and it felt like my jaw was displaced off to the right hand side. And I remember falling over, but once I hit a 45-degree angle, I passed out. Now I'm sitting down still. When I wake up, I snap my eyes open and there's just blood everywhere. and I push myself up off the ground, and I look at my driver, who looks at me and gasps with a look of horror on his face, and I'm like, oh, yep, nope, this is bad. So, and then I look over at the building where everybody was inside eating chow, and I see them pouring out of it like ants. I'm like, all right, they're coming over here to help me. And one of my other mechanic buddies was actually working 3 vehicles down, and he was the first that got to me. And when he got to me, like, we're taught self-aid, buddy. Like, you're supposed to be able to help another Marine. You don't always have to, like, wait for the corpsman. You can start something. And he got to me, and I was saying, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. And the only thing he could do is scream corpsman up. Which, I mean, they got there so quick. They put me on the stretcher.
It's funny what stands out in your mind when you're slipping in and out of consciousness, and maybe for the last time. Kenny had a severe head injury and was missing parts of his leg. Most of him was broken, but as his buddies sprinted along with him on the stretcher, the only thing he remembers now is that one of them kept hitting his head with their knee as they ran. After that, it all went black. During the surgery, they ran out of blood, and the anesthetist, Air Force Colonel Paulette Shank, laid down on the table and started donating blood during the operation. The effort saved his life, but he wouldn't know about it for weeks. 4 days later, he was back in the United States, short one leg and in an induced coma. There's really no reason filling a vacant position or creating a new one should be so fraught with anxiety. In a perfect world, you would spend more time on the interview process than figuring out where to find the right people, but it doesn't always seem to go that way. ZipRecruiter knew there was a smarter way, so they built a platform that finds the right job candidates for you. ZipRecruiter learns what you're looking for, identifies people with the right experience, and then invites them to apply for your job. These invitations have revolutionized how you find your next hire. In fact, 80% of employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site in just one day. And ZipRecruiter doesn't stop there. They even spotlight the strongest applications so you never miss a great match. The right candidates are out there. ZipRecruiter is how you find them. Businesses of all sizes trust ZipRecruiter for their hiring needs. Right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Go to ZipRecruiter.com/thisiswar. That's ZipRecruiter.com/thisiswar. ZipRecruiter.com/thisiswar. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Kenny lay in the bed for weeks, in and out of consciousness. There are 2 things that are weird about an induced coma. The first is that, for Kenny, it was like a waking fever dream. He called it a wild Dr. Seuss nightmare. But the other, more difficult part, was knowing his mother was suffering. Later, most of the doctors who were caring for him at the time told him they were pretty certain he wasn't going to make it. His mother got longer visiting hours and most of the truth as they understood it at the time. And the truth was that if Kenny recovered at all, he wouldn't be the same. They had to remove part of his brain to save his life and expected him to have a flat affect. Kenny and his mother communicated in jokes and jibes. The news nearly crushed her. In his head, Kenny knew his mental faculties were all intact. He could be amused and worried. He could feel empathy for his mother, feet away but in total ignorance of her son's condition. Gigi isn't a woman of means. Certainly at the time she was wondering how she could change her own life to better take care of her son. How she could learn to relate with a young man who, as she understood it, would never be the same as the man she sent off to Iraq.
When I was actually awake, I figured out if I pushed my pain button, it would beep. And if I kept pushing it, it would keep beeping. Now, mind you, this is in a time where my mouth is wired shut, I have a trach in, and both of my arms are being held in the air by like these, they look like Swiss cheese blocks, but they're made out of foam. So I can't talk. I can only communicate by blinking. And I look at my mom and I blink at her. And my pain button was taped to my finger so that I only had to move the very tips of it. And I see the nurse getting ready to walk into the room. And because it would keep beeping, I figured I'm just going to start mashing this thing and shaking in bed. So I started mashing it, and it's just like, beep! Kenny? And like I start shaking in bed. She starts freaking out. The nurse dives at the bed, looks to like assess the situation. And she's like, wait a second, nothing is actually going on. And she's like, that's not funny, Kenny. That's not funny. My mom's in the corner bawling. She's like, that's my son. He's in there. That's him. That's so him. And so like that was basically how I let my mom know that I still had personality.
It wasn't much of a joke, but it got the message across. Kenny's recovery would take years, but he was on his way. When Kenny had visited the Marine recruiter fewer than 3 years before, the recruiter was direct. He told Kenny there was a war on and there was a real chance that he would go and come back hurt, or go and die. Kenny said as he struggled with the loss of his leg and some of his faculties, his mind returned to that talk, to how genuine the recruiter had been with him. He says it was that Marine's forthright attitude that kept him from getting bitter. You see, Marines fight, they blow things up, some of them even fix cars, but that was secondary in Kenny's experience. Adapt and overcome is the mantra suited as well to a recovering Marine as to any other.
Like, I would talk to the doctors. I'm like, hey, like, am I going to be able to walk again? Like, what kind of thing am I going to get? And they don't know, or they wouldn't tell me. They wouldn't give me a straight answer. Finally, one day, there was a Marine that came walking into my room, and I don't even remember his name. I wish I did. And he was an amputee. He had shorts on, and he was an above-the-knee amputee. And he was like, look, dude, I'm going to give it to you straight. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And you need to know that so that you can prepare for that. I'm like, okay, cool. So I started asking him all kinds of questions. And he's like, look, you're going to leave the hospital. You're going to be like, hey, this is fine. Everything's great. Hunky-dory. You're going to put a prosthetic on and hate life again. It's not fun. There are days that it really sucks. But you're going to adapt and overcome because that's what we do. That's what we do as Marines. And I was like, finally, yes, I have an answer. That's awesome. And I mean, he was right. If I wasn't prepared for it to suck when I first put a prosthetic on, like, it would have totally defeated me. But because I was prepared for all of that, I was able to be like, all right, this is normal. You know, I'm just going to have to take a few days and try and tough it out. And like, eventually my leg will build up some level of tolerance. But yeah, if I hadn't have had that Marine come into my room and tell me that, like, I think it would have hurt me a lot more.
The Marine wasn't lying, though. It did get hard. A lot harder for a longer time than he would have preferred. At one point, Kenny's rehab therapist took his leg away because he was pushing himself too hard. After 2 combat tours and multiple surgeries, walking around the hospital wing until he no longer could feel didn't seem so hard. But it wasn't about his resolve. It was about what his body could take. After all, humans are fragile creatures. Kenny's life was mostly making trips to the hospital and heading back to the hotel/apartment where the recovering wounded all hung around. He was still in his early 20s, still skinny and baby-faced, except for the scarring where his right jaw had been rebuilt. He and one of the other hotel inmates, Steve Kiernan, decided to move out and get a place together. After a while, though, Steve told him he'd be moving out.
He applied to this organization called Homes for Our Troops. And I was like, dude, that's so cool that you got accepted. That's amazing. And he's like, yeah, you should apply as well. And I'm like, yeah, but like, I still have a leg. Like, there's other guys out there that are worse than me that probably need it more. Like, I'm not going to do that. And he looked at me and he's like, dude, we all think that way. Sign the damn paperwork. If you don't hear anything, then fine, you don't hear anything. He's like, but they can't get enough people because we all are like, oh, there's somebody worse, you know, let him have it. He's like, you know, go ahead, just send the paperwork in. If you don't hear anything, fine, c'est la vie, nothing happens. And I was like, all right, and I'm kind of spiteful, so I'm like, I'm going to do it just to prove you wrong. And then, like, you know, 2 months later, they're like, you've been accepted. And I'm like, oh, wait, crap, I'm going to be getting a house. That's kind of wild.
The builders who had done Steve's home had done so in fewer than 28 days, just to beat a record. Since Kenny's house was to be the 100th the organization built, they decided to set a new record. In the end, working around the clock with contractors from all over the area, they took Kenny's house from a stone slab to an occupancy permit in a little more than 76 hours. Kenny hadn't been aggressive about getting the house because he knew other guys who had had it worse, and that's a common theme. When you're so focused on helping your friends, though, that you won't let yourself go, things can get ugly. It's something Kenny worries too many Marines continue to learn the hard way.
We recently just had another Marine from our unit commit suicide. So not only did we lose 7 in Iraq on the tour that I got hurt on, but we've lost 4 others since then.
What Kenny discovered himself, even as he tried to stay tough during both his recovery and his rehabilitation, is that even once you're home and you have slipped into your new life, there remains with you a fact of your being different. You are different to you, and the world is different around you. For Kenny, it manifested itself in the day-to-day trials of going from having 2 legs to having 1, and the little things you don't think about until you have to.
So as Marines, we adapt and overcome, but there are certain things that doing them over and over, day after day, does start to chip away just a little bit at your resolve. And so, like, day to day, the little things that I would realize that were, like, a little bit harder than they used to be because I'm missing a leg, like reaching all the way down into a stand-up washer, or, not being able to get quite where I want to go. All those things just slowly chip. And so having the home has completely, everything is accessible. Everything, like, it's basically perfect. Like, that was like the first day of the rest of my life when I first got those keys to that home, because everything in that home is catered to my needs, which, let's face it, eventually I'll be an old man and the prosthetic may or may not be as viable anymore. So then having a home that's already built for that eventuality is super nice.
Kenny joined the Marines as a means of helping him get a good job, but from the first time he learned what it was like to be counted on so completely by others, his life trajectory changed. Long before the mortar landed, Kenny embraced the vocation of providing his particular expertise in support of his brothers and sisters in the service. It never occurred to him for a second that they were doing the very same thing.
When they presented me with the keys, one of my buddies, Steve Norris, he's a Gold Star father, he had found the anesthetist, and so she came walking out of my front door. Now this woman, when I was losing blood because of the injury in my left leg, and they ran out of my blood type, she went and laid down, and it came from her into me. Like, she is directly responsible for keeping me alive, basically. I had seen her face 100 times, and then seeing her in person walk out of my front door, welcoming me home, like, that was beyond emotional.
When he was working on LAVs under fire, Kenny Lyon wasn't making a sacrifice. Neither was Colonel Shank when she made her field donation to help keep her patient alive. We talk about people making sacrifices for their country or for one another, but sacrifice might not be just the right word. When you make a sacrifice, the implication is that you're giving up something important to get something important. But sometimes, a lot of the time really, what we get from people who serve is a gift. It's a gift given without expectation and without a sense of quid pro quo. The pure intention to do good is what makes these acts of selflessness and heroism a gift. That they are given with no consideration of personal loss is what makes them precious to the people, or in this case the country, that accepts them. Next time on This Is War.
Hello, ma'am. My name is Brandon Metalis. I'm a United States Marine, and I carried the remains of your son. Hearing her voice, knowing that was the mom that kissed him goodbye, it really made it real. Definitely.
Subscribe to This Is War on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you're listening right now. If you're listening on an iPhone, just say, "Hey Siri, subscribe to This Is War." For show notes and more information, simply tap or swipe over the cover art. You'll also see offers from our sponsors. Please help support our shows by supporting them. Another way you can help support This Is War is by giving us a 5-star rating and review, or by following This Is War on social media. And be sure to tell your friends and show them how to subscribe. Are you a combat veteran, or do you know one with a story to tell? Reach out to us at stories@thisiswar.com with your dates and branch of service and a brief description of the story you'd like to share. I'm Anthony Russo. This Is War was produced by Incongruity Media. Executive producer, Hernan Lopez for Wondery.